Well, guys, I do have something I have to tell you. In the last couple weeks, I have been struggling with the worst episode of insomnia I've had in ever. And so, as I've been planning to ramp up production, make a video every other day, something just keeps happening, and I'm just unable to get back on track. Now, usually it's because of my daughter, but it sucks because I go from being so tired that I can't focus on anything to then just laying there and not sleeping. So, yeah, it's been rough, but through that time, I have played some video games when I felt normal enough to be able to actually formulate a thought. And one of those games that I've been playing lately is Another Crab's Treasure. It's a game I wanted to talk about a while ago, although I gotta be honest, I'm kinda glad I waited. Now why? Because there was an update that came out recently. Now, I don't know if you've kept up with this game, but this was supposed to be like a Souls-like where you're a crab, where your motivation is to try to get your shell back. You see, this queen has been imposing taxes, but she didn't tell anyone. You didn't know you owed any tax money. In fact, you didn't even know there was a queen. And all of this hits you at once as probably the funniest debt collector I've ever seen comes up and wants the money. Well, since you can't pay, he takes your shell. This then starts you on your adventure where you go to confront the queen and all of her cohorts about paying back the taxes. How much money does she need? And this leads to even further adventures. This being one of the main things that I like yet don't like about the game is that the boss or the main antagonist kind of bounces around. You're not really pitted up against any one person for quite a while. And while the game starts as you just trying to collect enough taxes to be able to pay the queen and to get your shell back, it quickly turns into a game about conservation and littering and pollution, because as you quickly notice, the ocean is filled with a bunch of trash. Now, this does actually kind of help you out because some of these things you can wear as a shell. Your shell is incredibly important. It has two main things. The first one being, of course, protection, and the other is this game's version of magic. It's like your special attack that is limited and does take umami, or this version of MP, to be able to refill and attack again. The really fun part about the game is that each shell has its own different stats. Some have a ton of defense and can take a ton of punishment, but then maybe not have the greatest special attack, while others are like a glass cannon, so to speak. And so you kind of gotta weigh the options between which one do you really want to use and for what purpose. Now, by the way, when I do say shell, there needs to be quotation marks around that, because really, these things can range from like a shot glass to a soda can to an old banana peel. There's many different things. It's all the trash that you find that you can end up wearing as being your new shell. But of course, you also have a weapon. You gotta have some form of attack, right? Well, for this, you have an old rusty fork that you found. And what is nice is later on in the game, I would say in the first couple hours, you are able to find like a blacksmith who can actually upgrade your fork. This isn't the only thing that can be upgraded or unlocked, because even before you're able to upgrade your fork, you're actually able to open up a skill tree, which has a lot of different options for you to grow your crustacean the way that you want him to fight. And honestly, when it comes to all this, the game just has a lot of options. It has a lot of depth. The combat itself is relatively Souls-like, if you will. You really gotta focus on defense. You gotta focus on dodging. You have a limited amount of stamina, and you can't just go through, hacking and slashing, or you're not gonna last very long. Man, like every good Souls-like, it's also really difficult. There's definitely some opportunities for you to be able to either upgrade or make yourself better, and there's also assist options, which I like the idea of being able to do that. Not everybody's going to be able to grind this game out, and there could be a point when you think you're gone as far as you can. So it's nice to see that there's options where you can turn down the difficulty, so to speak. You can adjust how much HP the enemies have, how much damage they do, or you can even give yourself a gun, which completely changes the whole scope of things. I had to check it out. I was really interested. You basically could one-shot most of the enemies, and yeah, that's not as fun either, honestly. But the actual difficulty is fair. I do feel like it's balanced but it is difficult, and there's going to be people that, yeah, this is going to be too much for them, and they're going to want a little bit of help, a little assist, if you will. As for myself, the combat, yeah, it's difficult, but it was rewarding, and it was doable. For me, the thing that got the most frustrating was the platforming. Your little crab, he has this ability to kind of swim, and that can kind of boost you forward a little bit, or help you almost glide to your next landing spot, but he has almost no, like, stickiness when it comes to staying on really small, narrow little items, and there's a lot of those in this game. And the fact that this is really open and exposed, you can be able to choose your own path really easily, also means you also get, like, lost a lot, or you're all in places where you're not sure where to go. You know, you have a general direction, but there's a lot of little options, and you can easily, like I said, just like fall to your doom really easy. Now, the nice thing about it is, it doesn't really hurt you when you fall, but it still sucks. It really slows down the game for me. That was my biggest gripe, honestly, when it came to the actual gameplay. But for many of the reviewers, the cool kids, the ones that got the codes, it was actually performance that was a big problem. And if I'm being honest, I didn't notice it being that bad when I played it. But again, I got it after, I know for 1.1 update, and I think there was a second one relatively early while I was playing the game. So maybe I've gotten enough updates where there isn't performance problems, but at the same time, I've also realized that I can kind of deal with a lot of crap. Like, if I complain about performance being an issue, it's a massive issue. I just sort of am used to games not running that great, you know? I'm a Switch player, so I know that it's not going to be perfect, but I never noticed it being a problem for me. And yeah, there was a few like little lags here and there, but again, none of it really ever happened during combat or any point where it really affected the game, or, you know, was enough that was frustrating. There's things like pop in, for instance, which happens in almost every Switch game, or there's like a little lag or something when you're coming to a new area. Stuff like that like we're kind of used to as Switch users. I'm not saying we should have to deal with it, but we're used to it. And of course, when it comes to graphics, the game, for me, I think looks pretty good. Does it look like the PS5 version or the Xbox or probably even the Steam version or whatever? Of course not. Of course not. But it looks pretty good, like being on the Switch. So ultimately, I really did enjoy this game. I haven't completely beaten it yet, but I'm really far into it. I'm about done with it. And for me, I would recommend getting it, especially if you're looking for a new Souls-like game. Especially if you're looking for a game that has that Souls-like mechanics with a few new twists. You know, and I think that's one of the things that this game really does add, is just a little bit more, number one, humor. The game is hilarious, outright great in that regard. But also, with the switching of the shells, with the special power, things like that, the game does add even more mechanics to the already tried and true version of a Souls-like. Not to mention the accessibility. Honestly, there's a lot to like here. And for me, I never really had an issue with a lot of the problems that people were talking about when it came to performance. Now, again, I do believe that I played it after a few updates, so I guess I got lucky by not being one of the cool kids this time. But ultimately, I'm like this. If you really love Souls-like, then this is a great game. You should pick it up. Although if you have a huge backlog and you have other Souls-likes that you're working on, you know, this is going to be one of those games that you can kind of hold off on. You can put on a wish list, wait for a sale. It's not going to be one of those that everyone's talking about and they're going to ruin it for you. Because surprisingly, this game released to little fanfare, which is interesting because this is one of those games I've been kind of excited for a while, and yet when it dropped, I didn't see a lot of people talking about it. But for me, it definitely earns that 8 out of 10. I'm curious what your thoughts are. Is this a game you've been interested in? Is this one that you're thinking about picking up, or you're waiting on a sale, or maybe just not interested at all? Anything and everything in the comment section down below is much appreciated. I love each and every one of you guys. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.